Hi there. Our website's part of your SMB SaaS offering. At Mono, we're dedicated to guiding our partners on everything around websites. So whether you're looking for a do-it-yourself solution, collaborative do-with-me approach, or full-service do-it-for-me setup, the Mono platform delivers the ultimate technology to help you and your small business clients grow. Beyond websites, Mono also offers a variety of SMB-friendly digital marketing solutions. Want to know more? Reach out to us. Mono, we drive business.
All right, so thanks. And I'd like to add my personal welcome to all of you out there joining our virtual summit, our first virtual summit. I'm Charles Laughlin, by the way. I'm a co-founder of BigFive Digital. Personally, I miss the live events, but this is the new normal, and I'm actually getting very excited about the virtual format. I've attended a few and now producing one, and it's exciting. And I think the format offers some unique value and unique capabilities. So we're excited to see how it unfolds today. Our guest right now is Herman Singh. He is the CEO of Future Advisory and the author of a new book. And the book is called DI-VOLUTION, an essential guide to winning in a digitally transformed post-pandemic environment. Bit of a mouthful, Herman, but it says a lot. Welcome, by the way. Nice to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks, Charles.
Great. Great to have you. So maybe the best way to start off, I know many of our audience are familiar with you, but perhaps not all. Maybe you could sort of say, what is the one thing from your long career that maybe you're best known for? People can read your bio for all the details, but kind of share one thing that people may know you for.
I think I'm very well renowned in the industry for being the source of disruption, whether it's in banking or in the telecommunication industry. I have driven change from inside of those organizations, and generally what I'm known for is challenging the dogma in those organizations to build, I guess, transformative new and innovative businesses for them. And so to a large extent, I'm the one that's kind of asking the why question, and that's kind of the track record that I've had and why most people know me.
Okay, so you've probably had some contentious board meetings over the years.
Indeed.
All right, great. So your book, maybe the best way to get into it. Can you summarize its basic thesis in a sentence or two?
Yeah, so the word devolution is actually a shortened version of digital evolution. And basically what the book points out is that it's been underway for decades. So this is not something new. But what happened is that COVID basically turned years of change into weeks and months of change, effectively. And so a lot of what's been available has been available for a long time. Mm-hmm. And actually, the word normal and complacency are replacements for each other. And so when people say they want to go back to the normal, they actually mean we were complacent. A lot of what we considered to be normal wasn't normal. It was just us not adopting what was available, and COVID made us do that. And the book basically explains why it's happening, where it's heading to, and why it's absolutely crucial for us to begin to accelerate the rate at which we've adopted digital evolution in our businesses and lives.
Yeah, it's been talked about a lot in the last few months, but the notion that, so many things that we're brewing or we're beginning to get adopted have just been pushed forward 5, 10, out of however many years. It's quite amazing. You see these sorts of accelerations, I don't know, certainly not once a decade, perhaps once a generation if we're lucky.
Indeed.
Depending on whether you consider it luck. Yeah. Winners and losers by a large measure here. So could you boil it down to one lesson, maybe one or two lessons that you would like a reader to walk away from? And maybe also, who do you really want to be reading this book?
Great. Let's start with that last question first. The book was primarily written for professionals in small businesses and large businesses, but I've found a lot of parents are reading it because they want to guide their children, and a lot of government leaders are reading it because they want to understand where their companies are going to and what they should be doing. The key lesson, I guess, is really one of changing before you have to. It's the fact that digital is an enabler, but it can also be an opportunity, but it can also be a threat. And it's only a threat if you don't adopt it. I often look at the way companies are impacted by COVID. And what's very clear is that there's a whole bunch of companies that were lucky. They built the thing that was essential, and they just rode that wave. There were companies that basically adopted all of this technology early, or they were born digital. That really helped if you were born digital. If you're a legacy company, but you were ahead on digital implementation, you did okay. The companies that are really struggling are the guys that were behind the starting line and didn't understand this. I mean, there were companies that hadn't given their staff laptops. Their staff didn't have PCs at home. They didn't have reliable connectivity. And those companies got burnt out seriously. So really, it's about saying change before you have to, figure out where your frontier is and get there quickly, because that's where the war is actually going to happen.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have a particular focus on small business at BigFive. Our sort of mission is sort of, bringing together the ecosystem that serves small business to digitally enable them. There's been a huge, just in the small business space, a huge transformation around many things, fintech being a big one, the sort of the contactless transactions and so on. So there's been a lot of exciting things going on with small business. But what I've observed, perhaps globally different, is this notion of the pandemic has made the large larger and the small smaller, to put it one way. How do you see that, and do you see any silver linings or opportunities for small business out of this, that perhaps in this fairly gloomy environment for small business you can glean some hope?
It's great. I mean, look, I think what COVID has definitely done is expose the social cracks, and it's leveraged those cracks open in the world. But oddly enough, I in the business I'm in, and in the business that many of my partners are in, we've seen a very interesting trend where local companies are now able to go global. So basically, what I'm seeing is an amazing willingness to use professionals from other countries. I've probably worked in 20 countries just this month. And these are things that would never have been possible before. So if you're a small company and you are building amazing content, now's your time to build your brand, get out there and go global fast. Taking those solutions out, it's a wonderful opportunity. Big companies are very open and very responsive to doing things they would never have done before. I mean, if I'd said to people, I can't fly to your country to work, but I'm happy to do it online, they would have gone to someone else. Today, suddenly there's a level of acceptance that hasn't been there in the past. The next thing that's happened is a lot of companies are now very open to gig work. So really what they're looking for is they're parceling out work and they're sending this out. And what you want to do is get onto those platforms where you can secure gig work, deliver it, and turn that first customer into a reference. And if you do that and you do that well, a lot of my business now internationally is coming from repeat business. So really, I want to just emphasize that. The other thing that I've seen is there are much lower barriers now to entry for small companies. The tools that you need, digital tools that you need to build a business are now easy. They're available. WooCommerce is out there. You can build an e-commerce site very, very quickly. And finally, I guess small companies are in a position where they can build more human and high touch and personal services than big companies can. And they really need to be finding ways to leverage that. So overall, certainly if you're a tech company or you've got any element of tech in what you do, you have an opportunity to really go global, and you should seize it now. Yeah,
and I agree with that. I mean, you certainly see that tool, that sort of virtual toolkit was there before, but I think the awareness of it has expanded, and also I think a lot of companies have doubled down on offering these solutions, and also made, what I've observed, a lot of companies have made really great deals to small business to use it for free for much longer than they might have prior to this. So it's a golden opportunity to test out technology if you're a small business. I would agree. So if you were advising a company, let's say you're advising a young entrepreneur right now, and you may have touched on some of these things just in your last answer, but where should that startup energy go right now in terms of business stock? I'm guessing it's a knowledge type business that can exist anywhere, but do you have any thoughts on, boy, if I were starting a business now and instead of doing consulting, I would do X, Y, or Z?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, look, all the stats is very clear, right? If you're in cleaning or home fitness or home tutoring or home repairs or reskilling or gardening, you've done well, right? So the guys that I've seen doing particularly well are people who are helping remote workers to reskill, building solutions for remote workers. That's a growing business. Helping companies run conferences online is a great business, because all of a sudden, all of this has been digitized. I've been running a couple of conferences. These solutions are not, click and play and drag and drop. There's a lot of work to be done. If somebody figures out a way to make that easy, exactly. I think if you can find ways that you can help SMEs, other SMEs, you help your peers, there's a great opportunity. Every web developer I know is blitzed with work.
Mhm.
The SEO market, the search engine optimization market, the digital marketing business, fantastic. Those small companies don't know how to use this stuff. So if you can figure out a way to help them, that's really powerful. And then finally, I guess, helping those companies get streaming, webinars, and even e-commerce going is very powerful.
Interesting on SEO. I think one thing that's going on is that that physical location used to be your brand and your advertising. And yeah, maybe some of that's coming back, but that's not what it used to be. Now you have to use digital tools to find customers. And I think that maybe for a lot of companies, that's brand new. They used to just rely on, maybe a listing and then drive-by business. And that's just not happening as much. So yeah, I think one thing pops up, another thing, goes away. So a little bit of a tangent. There's a few businesses that I think were existing before the pandemic that I thought would take off like a rocket ship, and maybe haven't yet. And one was this notion of the cloud kitchen. You familiar with this?
No, I don't know this. Sorry.
Well, it's this notion of having a dedicated restaurant that's purely virtual. It's only for to fuel the delivery business. But that I thought, oh my God, the pandemic is just going to make that just flame up, but it hasn't. So it's not always doesn't always land where you think it's going to land, which is sort of interesting. Couple more things before we go. So there's a lot of conversation about how long we're in this, and this is a moving target because there are various stages of lockdown and people are going to restaurants again to some degree, depending where you are, but it's still not anywhere near what it was before. The economies are still very much depressed. Anywhere I look, again, varies, but within the continent, certainly. What is we've had a conversation before, and I came away from it thinking Herman's a little bit of a pessimist on sort of the timeline here. Has your outlook changed? Are you still long-term? You think we're in this for a while?
I do think so, but I think what I have done is I've tempered one element of it, which is I think it varies significantly by industry and segment. So for example, professional workers globally have actually seen their incomes return pretty back to where it was before COVID. Why? Most of us are able to work remotely and we're still getting paid and we're still able to get business. But what we've noticed is individuals who are less, I guess, in cognitive jobs, more manual, and who can't work remotely, they've seen a collapse in their income, and that's not going to turn around quickly. I think if you look at the travel industry, that's going to take a lot longer to get back. I think 35,000 hotels in the US are probably going to close down this year, and they're going to close down permanently, and those buildings may get repurposed. We are currently seeing the Greek shipping industry cutting up cruise ships. They're cutting them up for steel. That's not coming back, right? Like and planes are being stripped for parts, and so there's a whole bunch of industries where there's permanent capacity leaving the industry, and you've got to assume that even though travel might get back to the numbers of where it was 3 years ago, it's not going to get back to revenue because business is not going to be flying people around for business. Tourists, yes. Business, no, because we've seen how cost effective it is to do business over Zoom and Teams, etc. So generally, I think it's 3 years until we see free movement again when all of us get the COVID. But I think the high street, we could be seeing anything between 5 to 10 years before we get anything near to where we were. I think we're going to end up, my personal view is it's a lost decade and we just need to batten down the hatches and push through.
Yeah, well, that raises a thousand questions, but I'll follow up with one or two. The city center, I think that the future of the city center is a fascinating conversation. I mean, there was great, depending on the city, there is great thriving cities and there's cities where that sort of, they'd already been decimated by other disruptors. But what do you think? When I go to a major city, you see these big office towers, and now you see all the stats about remote work in the future. It's not going to be 100%. Some of that's coming back, but it's not all coming back. And then the need for space, I think, in a hybrid remote office environment will collapse by some factor. What happens to all of this? I mean, how do we reimagine the city center? Big question for a couple minutes answer, but.
Look, I think the way you got to think of this is a big building is an asset on somebody's balance sheet, right? It's whether you lease it, rent it, or buy it. It doesn't really matter. It's an asset that you're paying for. And if your competitors have everybody working from home with no costs, only variable costs, and you've got this huge cost on your balance sheet or income statement, you're in big trouble over time. So the first thing I think is competitive pressure is going to drive people to moving out of expensive real estate. Secondly, I think we're already starting to see people selling apartments in big cities and moving out to the suburbs. We're seeing that in most countries around the world. It's a function of many things, including transit, the risk of infection in transit, and the fact that companies have allowed you to work from home. So I think de facto, you're going to see this happen. I think these big buildings are going to get repurposed, and it's going to be interesting to see what they get repurposed into. But I think we've really reached the end of this concept of the big city center, tall towers, and everybody working in one place. There might be studio type, creative type, collaborative type businesses where that still works, but largely where people just attended a place to be seen, that's gone.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. So look, I could go on for a long time. I love talking about sort of all the unintended, the second, third order effects of all this, and fascinating discussion. It's a good way to kick off this event. We really appreciate you joining us and helping us launch our first virtual summit. Very excited to have you. And I assume people can find your book on Amazon and wherever they buy books.
Exactly.
Devolution, longer title, but that's the word to Google, I guess, or plug into Amazon. Anyway, Herman, thank you very much. It's been a delight to have you.
Thank you, Charles. All the best.
All right, great. Well, stay tuned for our next session and look forward to the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.